Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis podcast. I am one of your three co-hosts. My name is John Dehlin. What is your name?
My name is Margi Dehlin. Hello, everyone.
And I am Natasha Helfer Parker. Hello.
Hi, Natasha. Thanks for joining
Hello,
us.
Dehlins. Nice to see you again.
We love you. Okay, so we have a kind of a special episode today. And the way that it's special in a weird sense is that it's different than anything we've done so far. And let me explain what I mean by that. So far on the Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis podcast, we have been discussing different topics. And, you know, we just got done with a really good series on topics for women, special topics for women navigating Mormon faith crisis. We've covered communicating with believing family and friends. We've covered healthy marriages, sexuality. We've talked about grieving and how to handle your emotions. We've talked about how to deal with priesthood leadership and et cetera, et cetera. Lots of different things. This episode's a little bit different. What we have always envisioned for our website, MormonFaithCrisis.com, is that it have a consolidated list of resources that people can consult when having a Mormon faith crisis. Because whenever we do workshops and retreats, whenever we do coaching, there's always our goal, believe it or not, as coaches and therapists, is not to maximize the number of clients we have or the number of hours. I know personally, as much as I love coaching, if I never had to coach another client because everyone didn't need it and everyone was okay, I'd be fine with that. I would just do other things. Do you feel that way, Margi?
Mm-hmm.
Natasha?
I love the work I do. I think I would do something. I always find it interesting that we have to talk about certain issues that we are talking about. So,
yeah.
Oh, like money and stuff?
No, I mean, we obviously focus on faith transitions because we've seen such a need for that in the last 10 years, especially, at least in my practice. But if I wasn't focusing on faith transitions, there's 500,000 mental health disorders and mental health concerns that I could focus on. So I'm just saying, I would probably love to do this work regardless.
Yeah, I love this work too, for sure.
I just don't know. I mean, it's kind of like every time there's a general conference talk and I'm like, well, I just got busier, but I didn't want to be busier in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the only reason I say that is just because it's really important for me as a coach not to have the goal of maximizing my hours, but instead to have the goal of maximizing the well-being of my clients. And if that involves one-on-one sessions with me or workshops or retreats, that's great. But my approach to coaching is if I can give my clients podcasts or books or communities or experts or resources that allows them to heal and grow without having to pay hourly to me, I am, and I know you do this too, I'm more than willing to do that. And that's the spirit of this list. And that's the spirit of today's episode, is wanting our listeners and viewers and friends and everyone to know about our best attempt, Margi, me, Natasha, at putting together a list of books, websites, podcasts, movies, communities, therapists and coaches or networks of therapists and coaches, TED Talks, and even music for people navigating a faith crisis.
Yep.
And so if all you do, listeners or viewers, is go to MormonFaithCrisis.com/resources, check out our list, and then begin giving us feedback on what you like, what you don't like, what you want us to change, mission accomplished. And most importantly, if you just consult the list to the extent that you think it would help you, that's what this episode's about. We're going to be talking today about the list that we've put together. Natasha, would you like to add anything as kind of a disclaimer?
Well, obviously, this list is not comprehensive. It's our best shot at thinking about this for about a week, and so we hope to not offend anybody if we've left anything out. I'm sure we have, so let us know.
Oh no, it's for sure we have.
For sure we have.
Just before the we went live, somebody's like, you forgot Dan Vogel, you forgot the Tanners. And I'm like, oh my gosh, those are some of the most obvious possible things to remember. So anyway.
This is just kind of our first attempt, and it's gonna be like, I usually like lists to be fluid.
Yes.
I like them to be fluid, where we can shift and change and add and edit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so listeners, what we're going to be, and viewers, what we're going to be doing today is just at a high level talking about some of our favorite from this list, books, podcasts, TED Talks, communities, etc. Just and we could probably do TED Talks, or we could probably do episodes on each one of these categories, books or podcasts or communities or whatever, and we probably will. But for now, we just wanted to build awareness about this list, to get your feedback, and to get it in front of you so that you can check it out. Margie, what do you want to add?
No, I feel like we've covered it. We can get.
Hey, I'm going to do a plug for something since we're on here. I hope you don't mind. So, as I've been working with, if you're a therapist or a coach or an educator or anybody that works with people and trying to help them through faith transition type of issues, a big reason why I and several other colleagues founded the Mormon Mental Health Association about 4 or 5 years ago now was to be able to have a directory of people that we felt we could trust to not impose their own either religious or non-religious bias onto clients who are either in mixed faith marriages or wanting to have an individual therapist where they feel like they can be open and talk about their church issues without feeling like, the LDS therapist or somebody else doesn't really quite get what they're talking about. So we are having our Mormon Mental Health Association annual conference coming up August 1st. John and I will be doing a presentation on how to work with faith transitioners. So we're going to be educating other professionals on how to work with faith transitioners. Dr. Margi Erickson and Amy Heffernan are going to be teaching and talking about how to work with mixed faith marriages in particular. And there's going to be a 3-hour ethics, which all of us, at least who are licensed, need 3 hours of ethics in regards to working with people of faith, people transitioning from faith, and watching your own issues with faith, in that whole process. So hugely, hugely beneficial to anybody who wants to become more competent and able to work with this population, which is all of us. So August 1st, it's in conjunction with the Sunstone Symposium. In fact, if you want to attend both, there's a discount Sunstone is offering to those who are going to be attending the MMHA conference. So you can look all of that up at the Mormon Mental Health Association's website, which is on this resource page.
Love it. And yeah, it's going to be fun to present with you, Natasha.
We've never done that before, John.
Not to this crowd.
That's true. Actually, that's true. I don't think we've done a professional presentation before. We better get our act together. I better call you quick.
Yeah, I forgot exactly how to do professional presentations. It's been a little bit. I've jumped so much into my work that it's been a little bit since I've done that. No, I'm just kidding. It'll be great.
Yeah, we'll do it.
All right. Well, we always want to give a special shout out and welcome to those who are joining us on Facebook Live. Shout out to Linda De Azevedo, to Rochelle, to Ashley Nelson, and all those who are joining us. Jennifer Rooney White's there, Penny, even Margie's brother Tim has checked in. So, hey, Tim. We're excited for you guys to participate on this presentation with us. McLean Juggler writes, just do your karaoke to George Michael before your presentation. McLean's referring to our Thrive performance of I Want Your, by a George Michael song. We're trying to keep this faith friendly. So,
hey, sex is very faith friendly. I want your sex as a very faith friendly concept. So
okay.
There we go.
You're the expert. I'm trusting you, Natasha.
We want to sexually and intimately connect with with each other, especially our spouses, regardless of our faith issues.
All right. I'm with you. So thanks to all our donors that have donated. If you love this stuff, please support us because we need your support to keep this going. It's all under the Open Stories Foundation. Your donations are tax deductible. Go to MormonFaithCrisis.com, click on the donate button, choose whatever donation amount works for you, 10, 50, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. And you'll not only help yourself, but you'll help others in future generations who are navigating a faith crisis. So please support us. All right, so let's dig in. We've got this big list that we've just put together this morning. If those of you who are joining us right now can go to MormonFaithCrisis.com/resources. And we, again, this is a first draft. There's a lot we've forgotten. There's probably a lot of other categories we haven't included. And it's not meant to be comprehensive. We're never going to have a list of all podcasts, all books, all TED Talks relevant. We're trying to make this list kind of a greatest hits of resources that are of highest impact to date and stuff that are favorites of me, Margi, and Natasha. So that's what the list is. And let's go through some of them just to give our audience a sample. And we also want to ask our live audience what things they would recommend as well. The first category that we have are books and websites. And the first subcategory of that are resources or books or websites related to Mormon truth claims. Of course, what should probably come to many of your mind are resources like Jeremy Runnels' Letter to a CES Director, Mormon Think, the Tanner's Resources of Mormonism, Shadow and Reality. Letter for My Wife has been an important internet resource. Mormon Stories Podcast has a truth claims initiative that you can go to. And then there's several books that are just real classics, like Fawn Brody's No Man Knows My History. For me, the best book ever written about Joseph Smith or Mormon history. Dan Vogel's Joseph Smith, The Making of a Prophet is a close second. Grant Palmer's An Insider's View of Mormon Origins. Carolyn Pearson's book, The Ghost of Eternal Polygamy. And I have on there David O. Mckay and the Rise of Modern Mormonism. Those are some of my favorites. Margi, do you have anything you want to add or anything you want to sort of echo with that list of truth claims, websites, and books?
Nope, not really.
I know you read at least No Man Knows My History. Was that an important book to you?
Uh-huh.
Why?
For sure. Oh, I feel like at the time it was my first exposure to sort of a historical version of things. So, yeah, it was deeply impactful.
Okay. Natasha, anything you want to comment about any of those books or resources?
The only thing I think of now that maybe we could have included on here is Rough Stone Rolling.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't want to be rude. I didn't include that because it's such a slog of a read for some people. Like, the good news is a patriarch wrote it. He's a great historian. He's well respected. But many people find that book to be a slog. And so in the spirit of having it be
accessible,
but also just best of the best, I actually like Dan Vogel's book more than Richard Bushman's. But you're probably right. We probably should include it.
Well, and maybe it's because for a lot of people, because it's a Deseret book, book, it's like first access to something. Sometimes we don't get to the CS letter first, so
it's like
that's
a stepstone.
I felt like Rough Stone Rolling was a good conversation starter for people of belief.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, it kind of feels safe, right?
Yeah, and then I'll just say too that just right off the bat, one thing, a category we don't have on here yet that we are going to start working on is resources for believing friends and family that need support as well. Yeah. So we didn't really include that today, but we're going to be working on that as a category.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll add Joseph Smith, Rough Stone Rolling. I do think that's an important book. And listeners, if you guys have any other books or websites that are really critical, we'll read them as you post them in the comments section right now, because we always love your feedback. All right, so that's and we have to just a shout out to Jeremy Runnels, his work. I think of the Tanners as pioneers, and Jeremy Runnels as sort of a modern pioneer, along with Grant Palmer's An Insider's View of Mormon Origins. Those books are, highlights. Along with Fawn Brody, as like, if there were 4 things you had to read, I would narrow it down to that. CES Letter. It's so hard because Mormon Think was so important to so many people. But anyway, super important stuff. But a shout out to Jeremy, to the Mormon Think people, to Fawn Brody and Grant Palmer, who rest his soul, who have all done so much. It's important stuff. And all these people, it's just important. All these contributions are so important, and there's so many more. All right, so there is a book on mixed faith marriages specific. What we don't have are a lot of books on helping people navigate a Mormon faith crisis, particularly more secular books. So I have a list of kind of faithful and apologetic books for navigating a Mormon faith crisis, including Thomas McConkey's Navigating a Mormon Faith Crisis. That was something you recommended. There's John Ogden's When Mormons Doubt. There's Terrell and Fiona Given's The Crucible of Doubt. And there's Planted by Patrick Mason. All of those books are kind of faithful / apologetic. There's only one book I could think of that's kind of a secular book specifically written on the topic of navigating a Mormon faith crisis, and that's your book, Natasha. Can you tell us about that book?
Well, it's just what it really is a chapter in our book that we haven't written yet.
We need to freaking write. Are we ever going to write that book?
I think we need to get on that. So yeah, actually, but no, I just spent
this podcast is a precursor / excuse for that book that needs to be written.
That's right. Yeah, I basically the Facebook group Mormon Mixed Faith Marriages invited me last year to write some thoughts about how to, navigate a mixed faith marriage. And I took those thoughts and just kind of wrote a small, but hopefully, really to the point, and just here's some basic ideas and some ways that you can start talking about this to start somewhere. It's not necessarily a comprehensive type of book, but it's a good little kind of, has some good tips and strategies, and it's even written kind of in workbook style, so you can write some things in there, the two of you, and figure some things out, especially in that first part that can feel so tender and raw and difficult. So check out Natasha's book. There's a link to it. Natasha always does great work. I've never seen her not do great work. So thank you, John.
Check out that book.
Gotcha.
One Family, Two Views, How to Fortify Your Mixed Faith Mormon Marriage. We also have a webinar for those of you who would want to check out the Mixed Faith webinar that Natasha led, and I supported her a bit. If you go to mormonfaithcrisis.com/webinars, there's a webinar on navigating a mixed faith relationship that you can check out, and it's useful. There's a whole list of books that we've started to list that are kind of secular books, not targeted to Mormonism, but that deal with kind of gaining wisdom or deprogramming your mind or just seeing the world with new eyes, kind of with a more secular or scientific lens. Margie, do you want to list a book or two from that list that are valuable to you?
For the wisdom or spirituality or any of them?
We're doing wisdom and deprogramming.
Do you know, for me, that list, the only one that I have a personal, would be Zealot. And I actually didn't even read that book. It was an interview, but I loved the interview on the book Zealot. That's another thing you can do if podcast is your language. You can go ahead and see if there are any interviews with the author with some of these books. And that's what I did. It was Doug Fabrizio.
And this is the book, Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth by Reza Aslan. I think he's coming to Sunstone this year. But that's an important book. Natasha, are there any books from this list or that you haven't included that are important to you in this category?
Well, actually, maybe this one needs to be in the other category, but Recovering Agency, Lifting the Veil of Mormon Mind Control by Luna Lindsay. She wrote that book several years ago and approached me with it, gave me the book, asked me to look at it. And I'll say, you know, the only reason I probably haven't pushed that book more is just because it really does come from this, just her choice in her language of mind control and, you know, looking at it maybe more like cult recovery type of stuff that actually has some validity to it. But since I'm always trying to stay, you know, in that middle ground and make everybody comfortable, I kind of stay away from things that maybe would be seen as more one-sided. But it's actually very well done, and that is specifically on Mormonism, and it's quite comprehensive.
Yeah, and we would have to also list the book Combating Cult Mind Control by Stephen Hassan, who's been on Mormon Stories podcast. It's a groundbreaking book by the world's expert in cults. But shout out to Luna Lindsay. Is that her real name?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the one you just mentioned is, I think, cults in general, but this one in particular, and it's not that she writes necessarily about cults, but just the way she writes about it is more about the losing, you know, not being able to be a critical thinker within Mormonism. And I don't know, it was I really need to relook at it. It was well done.
Okay. Some of the books I like from this list on wisdom and deprogramming include Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind. I refer to that a lot. Of course, Bart Ehrman's book, Jesus Interrupted, but all of Bart Ehrman's series are great on understanding the Bible and Jesus better, because we often we kind of deconstruct Mormonism, and then we forget that Christianity has its own issues. And that's not to say we're against Christianity or Christian beliefs, but you know, for me to be consistent, you can't look at the Book of Mormon or the Book of Abraham with a certain level of scrutiny and then neglect the Bible. So those are important books. You know, others like Guns, Germs, and Steel, or Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me, Being Wrong, you know, Sapiens. These are all really classics. So just thought we'd mention those. We have a really good list of books around spirituality and mental health after Mormonism. Margi, do you want to list a couple of your favorites there?
Yeah, so some of my favorites, A New Earth, for sure. That was really great for me to just kind of understand my own brain, my own reactions to things.
This is A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle.
Right.
Right?
Yep. And then for sure, Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. And that's really, that was really profound. I think kind of moving into suffering, kind of moving into pain that you're feeling, and kind of what are the good things that you can find there in that place. So that would be another one. And then Katrina Kennison, for sure. So she's the author of Gift of an Ordinary Day, as well as Magical Journey. And she also has a blog as well. And I love her because I feel like you follow her in time as she struggles with loss. She's a close friend die, as she navigates her sons getting older and her sense of identity in the home. She worked, but was also, had a life of really thoughtful mothering. And so it really follows her through those changes of her boys struggling in teen years and facing challenges. So I love her for her meaning and her intention and thoughtfulness. It was just a great comfort to kind of see another woman go through some transition work, not particularly religious transition, but we know transitions hold things in common. So they touch a lot of those same things. So that was really beautiful. And then, yeah, I feel like those are the major ones for me.
Natasha, what are some of your favorite, books around spirituality, secular spirituality, and mental health?
Well, you both sent me Brave Enough as a gift one time, so that was nice. I've enjoyed reading through that. I love
Cheryl
Cheryl Strayed.
Mhm.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And of course, I love Brene Brown's work. And I mean, the title in of itself, The Gifts of Imperfection, Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are, I think fits the Mormon story quite well, right? So I love all that. There's so many. I mean, there's so many good books in this kind of particular realm that it's hard to. I'll probably be sending you some more ones that I've really loved.
Did you include Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown?
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay,
Braving the Wilderness.
Braving the Wilderness. Beautiful.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
And shout out to Noah Rasheta. He has a book, Secular Buddhism, but he followed it up with No Nonsense Buddhism for Beginners.
Yeah, I'm excited about
Clear
that.
answers to burning questions about core Buddhist teachings. We love Noah and the work he does with secular Buddhism, so we've got to mention that as a book. As far as healthy marriages, we've covered this before, but there are some really great books on healthy marriages. Natasha, I'm not sure we got your top books. I'm guessing that the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by Gottman or the Gottmans would be on your list. Is that right?
Absolutely. I usually start with the Gottman book as a good way to start with just really good framings and ways to think about what makes a good marriage. There's so many myths about what makes a good marriage work. And John Gottman in particular has really done the research over decades to show that some of the things that we think is what it's all about isn't necessarily the case. And those 7 principles I think are excellent. And I don't think they're just good for marriages. I often think about the 7 principles when I think about my relationship with my kiddos too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So
there are
true.
a lot of principles in marriage that apply just to human relationships in general, but also to child rearing, etc.
Yeah. And the State of Affairs is good. I mean, that's Esther Perel. So she's doing really great work in kind of the field of sexuality. She also has Mating in Captivity, which is good. Passionate Marriage by David Schnarch. I mean, there's a lot of good, just kind of foundational books that can really help you think past kind of some of the myths that we were told what makes a good marriage. So differentiation stuff is not necessarily what we were told, which is more enmeshed stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'll just throw a couple in. Some of my favorites, in addition to the Gottman book and Esther Perel. Margi and I really love Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendricks. As a great workbook for going through how to identify your broken places, how to heal them, and how to build intimacy by talking that through. And we really love Elaine de Botton's The Course of Love.
Yeah, beautiful.
As just a book around intimacy.
And that's actually, interestingly enough, a fiction book, but really hits at some of the myths of kind of our culture around what it means to really connect and have intimacy with another human being. So. Yeah.
So that's some of our books on marriage. Now, Natasha, you recommend a book on divorce. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, sometimes transitions mean that there are other transitions that come along. So we, of course, here at Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis kind of take a stance that a faith transition shouldn't be the only reason why you have to face a divorce. There's lots of resources to help you. At the same time, sometimes as you transition, you start looking at the many reasons why you're still married and whether or not they've been sustainable or toxic or, things of that nature. So sometimes divorce is something that happens as part of a transition period of time, including faith transition. So I really, really love the work of Constance Ahrens. She really pulls apart, again, many of the myths about divorce. We kind of see marriage as success and divorce as failure. Yeah. She really pulls that apart. There can be horrific marriages that just make everybody miserable. There can be really good divorces where people are really respectful and keep a sense of family and of respect. So she really does a great job of giving you strategies and ideas of how to, if you're going to go down that route, how to do it well, specifically if you have kids, which is what we're mostly concerned about in those scenarios.
I love that. That just really hits me where I live. On some level culturally, I wish for almost, when a marriage ends, some type of honoring where people came together and said, you had an amazing 9 years or whatever. And we honor that. And I wish we had a better cultural way.
I could not agree with that more. I mean, I wish we had divorce parties and celebrations, and I want a divorce registry if I ever get divorced.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, right. I love that.
Like we could just do so much better in honoring.
It's like, he's keeping the toaster and I need a new toaster. Okay.
Right. So true.
Because it is. I mean, you've grown up together, you've learned together, you've often had children together, you've created assets together. I mean, so many things that you've done, and then to just blow it all away under this like failed marriage narrative is really, it's pathetic and it's not true, and it's really diminishing to people's lives.
So agree.
One comment from a listener, Ellen writes, that the essay that I wrote with Brian Johnston called How to Stay in the LDS Church After a Crisis of Faith was a really important help for her understanding middle way Mormonism as she transitioned away from Orthodox Mormonism. So she throws that in. So I went ahead and added that under the Mormon Faith Crisis section. Thanks so much to Ellen for that recommendation. That's an important one, and I wrote it. I guess that's kind of the closest I've come to writing a book, so far. All right. Parenting. We've done, have we done a full episode on Gift of Mormon Faith Crisis on parenting? Have we done that series yet?
Yes.
Well, then those who have listened know that we're huge Shefali Saberi fans. So Margie, you want to list our favorite Shefali Saberi books?
Sure. So, and one thing I like about Shefali Saberi too is the things she writes about also allow you to go back into your own childhood too, and to kind of process some of those things that either you felt like maybe were missing, or strengths of your, parents growing up. But I love that too, because there's a lot of healing work. And she often says that it's like growing the parent up. You're growing up yourselves. So a great place to start with Shefali, in my view, is probably The Awakened Family. I think it's the closest blend of both practical, which comes at the end, and kind of philosophical, which she starts with the myths of that we often have culturally, what a good child is, and so it's a great way to have an introduction to her. If you like just practical, I feel like her second book might be a better place to start. That's Out of Control, Why Disciplining Your Child Won't Work and What Will. And then I love The Conscious Parent for that it's kind of a deeply rooted philosophical foundational book. Some people, you either really love it or it confuses you. So, but that's Shefali. She's also great with all this is true. Any author that we bring up, or you can go ahead and look for videos or interviews, and that is true for Shefali. She has amazing videos where people ask questions, where she goes into greater depth, and she's wonderful live as well. So.
Love it. And I think our listener, Mark Pugsley, recommended Parenting Beyond Belief as a book for parents who want, for parents who are worried about, can I raise a kid without religion? Can I raise a healthy moral kid without superstition or theology or organized religion? That's a book that's been helpful. Anything else you want to add about parenting, Natasha?
No, I've been referring to Out of Control parenting forever. So
yeah.
I really like that one too.
We have a good list of books on sexuality, Natasha, and they're all recommended by you.
And I could have kept on going. These are just this is barely scratching the surface. But so the first one is Check Your Baggage, which I actually wrote. So it's really about just kind of understanding the messages that are getting in the way of your sex life that we all grew up with and what to do about them. I did include an article that I was part of a team of writing on sex addiction and porn addiction and how those concepts fail our clients, and because in particular religious people are much more vulnerable to those kinds of ideas than others. For Goodness Sex, I really like because Al Vernacchio talks about sexuality in a way that can still very much be very value-centric, which I think people want coming out of maybe more orthodox religions, but still comprehensive and sex positive. Sex, God, and the Conservative Church is work by oh my goodness, what's her name? Tina Sellers, and she's up in Washington and has done a lot of work on the purity culture and how, so not necessarily Mormonism, but just Christian kind of denominations and a lot of the messaging that gets in the way of people's sexuality in that regard. Come As You Are, I think, is a good place to start. OMGS.com, I think, is awesome to help you learn how to masturbate, especially if you're a woman. We never kind of got those kinds of messages. And then
I looked at that. I'd never heard of that, but that's like understanding what your own anatomy and how it works. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like an awesome website where they actually like have instructional videos, and so many women have a hard time understanding orgasm or how to orgasm, especially in a reliable way. So many of us have been taught from an early age, that our husbands are supposed to awaken us, or don't touch yourself, or don't know yourself. And so we have a lot of issues with just being able to reliably, reach orgasm in our culture. And this is a wonderful way that talks. I would just say if you're interested in having successful sexuality with a body that has a vagina or a vulva, you should be looking at omgs.com. So whether you're a woman or a man or yourself.
Yeah,
That's
thank
great.
you for gender and non-gender inclusive language. That's important.
Yeah, it's really good. They just talk about all kinds of different, we always say, well, everybody's different. So you have to figure yourself out. But what they're finding is that there's like 5 to 7 pretty reliable ways that if you know these strategies, you can really take your kind of pleasure to, a very reliable way of reaching orgasm.
Is there a G-spot, Natasha? Yes or no?
There is a G-spot, but it doesn't necessarily come with all the myths associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a topic for another day.
Yes.
Can I bring up a book? And I'm just curious, one book that was really helpful for me with daughters and is I think it's Girls and Sex by Peggy Orenstein.
I really liked that book too. She's not a therapist, she's a journalist, and she went around the country and interviewed college-aged women on sexual stuff, and I think she had a really good outlook. In fact, I think both of my associations, AMFT and ASECT, have had her as a presenting speaker on that book.
Oh, really? Yeah.
All right. Well, lots of books to help you with sexuality. That's going to conclude our discussion of websites and books. If you, as listeners, have other recommendations of like must consult books in a faith crisis, we want to hear about it. We'd love you to go to mormonfaithcrisis.com/resources and just make a comment there. You can also email us at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com as well. Marcy has a comment. She writes, "Preach, Natasha. I can't believe how many former LDS women I have met that have never experienced an orgasm. It is so sad."
Yes, I would agree.
It is true.
Especially when we have such amazing potential for orgasm. We have, I think, triple the nerve endings you all have as men.
Whoa, that's not fair.
Look at that sex positivity. I love that.
Wait a minute. Who's engineering this deal?
Well, I think you guys got the easier equipment end of the deal, and we just got the more in-depth, harder to get to part of the deal, but definitely worthwhile when you get there.
All right, we'll have it. We'll do some additional discussion about this in the future episodes. We have a list of kind of must listen to podcasts. There are several Mormon themed podcasts. Natasha, what have been your favorite Mormon themed podcasts over the years that you like to recommend to people or that have been useful to you?
There's so many, but obviously you started us out of the gate with Mormon Stories. I mean, this is the first one that I knew about. So that's, I think, been an incredibly amazing, rich resource, giving podcast. And what I always liked about it from the beginning, especially listening to them as a therapist, was that it felt fairly fair.
What?
Fairly fair on both
Fairly
sides of the
fair.
equation. I think that's
Depending on the era.
pretty good. Yeah, depending on the era. Well, I was listening to Mormon Expressions at the same time. That was very biased with John Larson, which is fine. You can have a biased podcast. But as far as what I would be, referring people to, so I felt like I was able to refer people to some of your podcasts from a very early stage. I love, of course, Thoughtful Faith with Gina Colvin, Dan Witherspoon's, Mormon Matters. Year of Polygamy was very significant with Lindsay Hansen Park for me to listen to. I haven't gotten through the whole thing, but very significant. I run Mormon Mental Health, so of course I'm going to plug that.
That's a podcast for those of you who don't know.
Very helpful for people to be able to either share stories or have professionals come on and talk about things that most of us struggle with in one way or another, either personally or with our families. So those are some of the things that I think about.
Margie, have you ever been into Mormon-themed podcasting? That's a no.
A little, but I can say that subject matter-wise, Marriage on a Tightrope, I just feel Mixed Faith Marriage to have a podcast, and knowing how witty and thoughtful they are, I'm just going to plug that. Like, I just feel like that subject matter is just near and dear to me. And then I know for millennials, Elf on the Shelf, that audience, to have kind of a targeted audience with regard to that, I think that's really, really, so those are my notables. But yes, my habits probably veer a little bit away from subject matter.
As soon as Margie decided the church wasn't what it claims to be, she's like, I'm moving on. And she had no real intellectual interest in discussing progressive or post-Mormonism or Mormon history. So that's, is that true? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Bill Reel's podcast, Mormon Discussions, has helped a lot of people. Radio Free Mormon is, I'm hearing great things about that. Another shout out for Marriage on a Tightrope. We just interviewed Katie and Alan for Mormon Stories this week. Great stuff. And of course, shout out to some of the YouTube channels like Brother Jake, Dan Vogel, Thoughts on Things and Stuff, along with Elf on the Shelf. And you liked a podcast called Leading Saints, which I've never listened to, but that's one of those more faithful podcasts. Is that right, Natasha?
I don't know. Did I recommend
you
that
said
one?
But you said the podcast, was it David Osler?
Oh, yeah. Is that what it's called?
Maybe not. Maybe I've got the wrong one here.
Yeah, David Osler is running a podcast, but I don't think that's the name of it. So I'll have to.
Oh, okay. Maybe I got the wrong one here.
Sorry. Yeah, and he's, I think, trying to read, he was a bishop and was really, I think, moved by a lot of LGBTQ plus issues as he served. And, now he's more on the progressive side of things, nuanced and trying to reach, believing audiences. I think he does a good job. And he just interviewed Jana Spangler on faith transitions and things.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that. Yep.
Do you know what his podcast is called?
Okay. I'll have to look.
Is it Listen, Learn, and Love?
Yes.
Okay.
We got it. We'll add that or correct that, I guess we should say. And then Want to Be Balanced is also doing, I feel like, a podcast.
Yeah, Sean and Crystal Escobar, absolutely.
As they're transitioning and it's very much in time, right?
Yeah, we always love Sean and Crystal Escobar and all they're trying to do with Mormon Enlightenment and others. All right. Let's see. There are other podcasts that have been really useful for progressive and post-Mormons. I've already made a shout out to Noah Rasheta. His Secular Buddhism podcast is phenomenal.
Love it.
Oprah and Eckhart Tolle put together A New Earth, which is basically a discussion of their book.
So worth listening to, even if you've read the book.
I'm a huge fan of Sam Harris and his podcast Making Sense.
What do you like about it?
I just think Sam Harris just is really thoughtful, and he tries to take a really intellectual approach to everything, but wise, but balanced. And I just find him very grounded. Covers interesting topics. Margi, what do you like about Invisibilia?
I mentioned Invisibilia just because I feel like it kind of goes into the psychology of behavior, of why we think and feel the way we do. And it tends to be a great partner for, a lot of what we're sifting through as we become more aware of the default settings in our brain through kind of being, very connected to an organized religion. So it works hand in hand, I think, with having you be aware of your own brain and why it works and why you have thoughts.
I love it.
You act the way you do.
Any other podcasts you want to recommend, Natasha, that are more maybe secular in nature but relevant?
I should probably think about that. I think that when you're in something, you don't listen to it as much, right? So I know there's a lot of great podcasts out there that I just don't tap into. So if I think of any, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Same goes with marriage and relationships. Like I should know of podcasts in that area, and I'm really not thinking of any right now.
You're kind of living that realm. Esther Perel has a good podcast called Where Should We Begin, where she interviews couples about their relationships.
Yeah, it's great.
That's a really interesting one. And of course, on sexuality, there are at least 2 podcasts.
Woo, woo, woo.
Just so you don't have to self-proclaim, Mormon Sex Info is great, which is a podcast dedicated to sexuality within a Mormon context. And then, Natasha, you've broken out and you've got a podcast called Sex Talk with Natasha. You also do some live streaming on Facebook, but
it's not really a podcast. It's more like a webinar. But I do some stuff on Facebook Live, and one that I would add to this that I just thought of is Birds and the Bees podcast by Braxton Buxton.
Tell us about that.
It's more geared towards parenting and helping parents with their kids and sexuality in that regard, and he comes from Utah, so he's very culturally aware and about Mormonism. I don't think it's directed necessarily towards Mormons, the Birds and the Bees podcast, but it's definitely towards parents who want resources and help teaching their kids from.
Ooh, I'm going to check that out, Natasha.
Is he post-Mormon?
I'm not sure where he would say he is, but he's a therapist in Salt Lake City area. And
this is something that comes up so often.
He's part of the Mormon Mental Health Association.
That's great.
And I supervised him to become a certified sex therapist. So he's doing great work out there in Salt Lake City.
All right. That's Birds and Bees podcast on
and he just did an interview with me on masturbation.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people want to talk about that. And I'll always talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, on our list at mormonfaithcrisis.com/resources, we have a list of must-see movies that we think are great movies that parallel a faith crisis. And actually, I think watching a movie that's a really good metaphor for a faith crisis can actually be an intervention, can actually be therapeutic. So, this list includes The Truman Show, The Village, The Invention of Lying, Tangled, Smallfoot, Pleasantville, The Matrix, Moana, The Big Short, Spotlight. Margi, you erased in there. That's a great movie. And of course, Wild Wild Country and Going Clear are phenomenal books. And I know I made that list really fast, but you can go to the list to read it and to find those movies, but they're all great. Anything either of you want to say about those lists?
Well, I think I would second your intervention thing, especially when you go into it thinking about your faith transition. I'm going to purposefully, intentionally look at this movie with that kind of thought process in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, it becomes really therapeutic for many people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're coming to the end of our list. We've got a few more things we wanted to mention. A huge one is communities. We're going to be doing episodes on, or at least one big episode on finding community after a faith crisis. There are a couple of huge things I'm just going to shout out here. MormonSpectrum.org/map. You can find a global map of face-to-face communities all over the world, or in-person communities, even in Columbus, Ohio, or London, England. If you're looking for an in-person community, go to the Mormon Spectrum map. Women of a Certain Age is groundbreaking in terms of providing support for women, post-Mormon women. Sunstone, of course, is a classic face-to-face community. The Utah Valley Post-Mormon community is notable because it's so large. Several thousand people are in it. We love Salt Lake City Oasis. We love Affirmation for LGBTQ Mormons and post-Mormons, Mama Dragons. Any other in-person communities you guys want to give shout outs to?
I think this is really good. I'm sure there are others, but Mormon Spectrum, I think, does a really good job of trying to be very inclusive. So if you have a group that Mormon Spectrums isn't aware of, make sure you contact them. Let them know that you're around.
Love it. In addition to face-to-face communities, of course, there's some amazing online communities. Some of the top include the Ex-Mormon Reddit, which is probably the biggest in existence now. The Mormon Stories podcast community on Facebook is probably the biggest Facebook Mormon-themed community for progressive and post-Mormons. And then we've got a lot of emerging ones like Thoughtful Transitions, Mormon Enlightenment, Waters of Mormon for faithful, Mormons trying to stay in the church. Used to be called a Thoughtful Faith. And then we've got for mixed faith marriages, both the Mormon Mixed Faith Marriages group and the Marriage on a Tightrope group. And there are others, but those are some phenomenal online communities. Anything you guys want to add there?
No, those are the ones I can think of.
Okay. There are lots of good coaches and therapists out there. Maybe for this episode, we should just say that Natasha, Margi, and I do our best to make ourselves available. And you can always check out the Mormon Mental Health Association or Symmetry Solutions or the Utah LGBTQ Therapists Guild as networks for therapists. I think Encircle has a list of therapists that work with LGBT youth. Natasha, you care a lot about this. Anything else you want to say about therapists and coaches?
No, there's lots and lots of good people that are out there that we're not even aware of. So, of course, my big push is to try to get people who do good work in faith transitions or understand the cultural competency issues that we need people to be part of our membership at Mormon Mental Health Association. So if you know of a good therapist and you're seeing somebody that you really like, ask them if they're part of MMHA. So we'd love to send more people their way if they're doing a good job.
Excellent. Yeah. And I just want to give a plug for Finding Experts. I really do believe, and this isn't because I'm self-interested in any way, because I'd be fine if I never coached another individual or couple again if there wasn't a need, but you would never go to a brain surgeon for a heart surgery. You'd never go, to a urologist to be your OBGYN. And when you're dealing with a faith crisis, in particular a mixed faith marriage or LGBT issues, you want somebody who's really experienced, kind of an expert and culturally competent. And that's why I'm so grateful that you guys exist, Natasha, Mormon therapist, Margi. That's why I do the work I do, and that's why I'm so grateful that the Mormon Mental Health Association and Symmetry Solutions exist. So please get an expert. It's almost always worth the money. I should add Liz Dalton on this list. She's a phenomenal coach and mediator for divorces. So I'm going to add Liz Dalton to this list. She's really someone that Margi and I personally have used and have just found amazing things. One of her expertise is if couples are going to get divorced, how to get divorced in a way through mediation to avoid a lot of the expenses of divorce.
Yeah.
And
she's also you want to avoid the toxicity.
That's right.
Because it's not divorce that ruins children. It's parental conflict.
Yes.
And so Liz can help you, along with Natasha and others, can help you navigate your divorce in a way that minimizes the cost, minimizes the conflict, and maximizes the health for the children. Yeah. So those are great resources. So shout out to Liz Dalton. We love you. We've got TED Talks up here. Of course, Brene Brown stuff. And we've got some good TED Talks. We need to make our TED talk list bigger.
We should add Esther Perel.
Oh yeah,
there.
Esther Perel stuff.
Yeah.
And the last, oh, go ahead, Natasha.
No, I was just saying yes to Esther Perel stuff. She's
Yeah.
really interesting to make you kind of click differently about marriage.
Yeah.
And the last category we have is music for a faith crisis. And we, of course, have Mindy Gledhill's Rabbit Hole, Tyler Glenn's Excommunication album, Second Wind by Angela Soph, and finally, Red Wing by Sarah Sample, who we love and who we've had on Mormon Stories. We've had Angela Soph, Sarah Sample, Mindy, and Tyler all on Mormon Stories. And so many of you have songs and themes and anthems that are useful to you in your faith crisis. We should probably have our own page of songs for a faith crisis, but
they can make a Spotify playlist.
We should. That would be awesome. Plus, then we can use it for karaoke.
Yeah.
So true.
Absolutely.
Because it all comes back to
Because it
karaoke.
all comes.
It really does. Karaoke is true.
So this is our short but sincere attempt at providing you guys with resources for your faith crisis. We hope you appreciate it. Of course, please go to our webpage, mormonfaithcrisis.com/resources, to tell us critical resources that you think we should have included. We would love that feedback, and please share it with anyone you know. This list will provide you literally with decades of therapy if you use it. People really do refer to books and podcasts and TED Talks and communities and even music as therapeutic. So please take advantage. Natasha, anything you want to say to close?
No, just help us make this list great. Give us feedback.
Tim Weber, Margi's brother, writes, always try to be someone else's community to the best of your ability. If you see them having a hard time, it's fine. I promise all is right in the world. You just have to take off the glasses. That's a nice encouragement from Tim. Another way to say that is it gets better. Marcy writes, community was number one for me. In fact, I always suggest someone going through a faith transition, find someone they know and trust that can help them navigate the process. There is such a learning curve. So yes, thank you, Marcy,
I agree with that.
for that shout out. Margi, anything you want to say as we end this episode?
I don't think so. Only that with all this, it's testing out. You're going to just kind of listen or read and see how you feel about it. And that is part of the glorious and oftentimes challenging process of rebuilding. And it can be a deeply empowering experience. So, hold things loosely, try them on, no pressure. And hopefully as you go, you'll start, rebuilding.
I love it. All right. Well, we love you guys. Thanks for checking in. Please, if you value these resources, please, spread the word, like us on Facebook, give us a positive review on Facebook, positive review on iTunes, share, comment, email us, and donate if you can at mormonfaithcrisis.com. We have many more episodes in the works. Natasha, I'm going to put up here as a placeholder on this list, forthcoming book by John Dehlin, Natasha Helfer Parker, and Margi Dehlin. That's going to be a placeholder.
That's right.
On our list, but
make us do it.
yeah, thanks for supporting us, and know that we're going to be creating more content in the weeks and months and years ahead, and that your support will make that possible. We also don't have workshops and retreats. I've got some workshops and retreats that I'm thinking about organizing. Well, of course, there's Thrive, but we've got some Thrive things coming up. Natasha, I want to talk to you about some retreats and workshops coming up. And we want to continue that tradition of providing workshops and retreats for people in faith crisis. So
I think I have one scheduled for September in Oklahoma City if people sign up.
That's still is that still on the books?
I think that's still on the books.
All right.
Let's look at that.
I'm planning on it. Oklahoma City, September 13th. But I need to have, at least like 15 to 20 people to sign up to hold it. So if you're in the Midwest area, make sure you let us know you're wanting to come to that.
We have to update our list of events because it's a little bit outdated. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We really love your support. And we look forward to lots of content in the weeks and months ahead. We couldn't do it without you. Margi, I love you. Thank you for joining us.
Why, thank you. Always lovely to see you, Natasha.
Very lovely to see you both too. I love you both. Thank you everybody for all your ideas that you sent in. And hopefully we'll be hearing from you more.
All right, everybody. Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Take care. We'll talk to you guys soon.